The story begins with Han Sung-hyun, a professional couch potato whose legs apparently quit on him, staring at a show where a shiny knight is facing off with some dramatic undead king. As Han Sung chugs a drink, he wonders how exactly he managed to screw his life up this badly. Just then, the doorbell rings and a transmission investigation officer from the Superpower Control Bureau shows up for a routine check to see if Han Sung is still alive. The officer confirms that the guy hasn't awakened yet and tells him to report to the Bureau if he ever manages to get superpowers. This is the first time in 6 whole months that Han Sung has spoken to anyone outside, which basically means he can now enjoy another half year of peaceful, uninterrupted laziness. He checks the kitchen for food, but all he finds is expired junk. Limping around, he realizes it's been nearly 2 years since he last set foot outside. While everyone else would probably call him pathetic, Han Sung considers himself a tragic victim of this twisted world. His legs tremble as he watches a news report about a fire in a shopping area. The anchor blames it on some freshly awakened guy who probably committed a random crime before getting dumped into another world. Hearing the word awakened makes Han Sung remember the day everything went sideways. Random people suddenly started getting strange superpowers from who knows where, and the weirdest part is that once someone awakened, they were thrown into another world within 24 hours. They were given random tasks, and only if they completed them could they return to Earth. Almost only a few people ever made it back alive, so the newly awakened began committing serious crimes before being shipped off. Han Sung remembers that about 2 years ago, his family became victims of one of those desperate awakened idiots. The poor guy lost everyone he loved and never found the courage to stand on his own again. Still, he held onto a shred of hope, clinging to the thought that maybe one day his legs would work again and he could walk. Just the mere thought of stepping outside makes him wet his pants, and he wonders if things would have turned out differently only if he had a bit more courage. Just as he daydreams about leaving the room for anywhere at all, a blue system panel pops up in front of him. It mentions a dimensional shift being detected and connects to some system called Akasha. The system informs him that he has awakened a unique skill, and Han Sung glances nervously in every direction as the system grants him a skill named Avatar. Before he even has a chance to experiment with it, a 24-hour timer appears in front of him, with a warning that if he does not enter the transport field himself, he will be forcibly dragged into it. Seeing this, the limping idiot rushes around frantically, trying to gather his belongings as quickly as possible. He recalls that the average time for returning to Earth is about a year, and considering the rumors that time in the other world flows roughly 10 times slower than on Earth, he realizes he may have to survive for an entire 10 years before he can even hope to make it back home. The whole day drags on, and with just 3 minutes remaining, Han Sung has managed to grab whatever he could find in his place, looking more like he is preparing for a mountain camping trip than anything else. As the clock ticks down, panic sets in, and he wonders how a guy who can barely step outside is supposed to survive in another world with no power or skills. Suddenly, it hits him that he should at least try out and see what his superpower does. He yells the word Avatar, and a cheap copy of himself materializes in front of him. All Han Sung can see is his own face, or maybe a disposable version of himself. As he watches, he starts seeing 2 faces, and it doesn't take him much time to realize that he is actually sharing sight with his avatar. Han Sung feels nauseated from the strange sensation, and just then the system pops up with a warning that if he doesn't step into the transport field himself, he will be dragged into the other world. Han Sung gets all gloomy as he realizes his superpower is as useless as he is. Wishing someone else could go in his place, he decides to send his disposable copy instead. Surprisingly, it works, and the transport field recognizes the avatar as him. But the moment the transportation completes, Han Sung finds himself in the other world, where his avatar should have gone instead. Freaked out, he sees as the system informs him that he can return to Earth through an option called Return in the Karma Shop. But for that, he needs karma points, of which he currently has 0. Just then, a strange headache hits him, and the slowpoke finally realizes that he's been sharing sight with his avatar. He shouts, "Dismiss avatar," and the moment he's back in his own body, he rushes to the toilet and vomits. The only upside is that he managed to avoid being transported himself. He says summon avatar, and his copy appears in front of him. Staring into his own eyes, he realizes just how hopeless he is and wonders what he can even do with such a useless power. But then the system congratulates him, telling him he's achieved a great feat by returning to Earth without using the Karma Shop feature. For this, he earns a special reward skill called Dimensional Transport Field, which lets him travel to a previously visited location once per day. Just like that, Han Sung becomes the first person ever to return to Earth in such a short time. The system panel reveals that his karma balance is now around 2 million, and he cannot believe that all of this is gained just by dismissing his avatar. Since returning to Earth alone requires 1 million, it means nearly 10 years worth of amount has been collected in a single moment. After that, he thinks about how karma is awarded depending on the effects someone has made in the other world. It grows from both good and evil actions, or even by murder and doing some other chores. Karma is meant to be spent on either improving abilities or traveling back to Earth. He wonders if this could be a system glitch and worries that the system might later ask him to return the amount back. However, he shoves the thought aside as he believes there is no point in worrying since he did not intentionally make it happen. After that, he takes a look at the system menu and realizes that the return skill is as useless as he was a minute ago before he got all this karma. Then his eyes fall upon the strength and status choice in the system window, and he begins to wonder what he's going to find there. He decides to try the recoverability option, which demands 10,000 of his karma balance, and the second he uses it, his damaged legs begin to heal and he starts to feel them again. He reflects that this injury carried the memory of his farewell with his family and the reason he kept himself locked away in his room. After the recovery process, he acquires a new skill named Super Recovery. The scene then transitions to his gym where he finally succeeds with the leg workout and notices just how greatly his body has improved. Even though he poured a lot of karma into healing his legs, he still has a ton left and considers what could be done with it next. He then notices the strength and unique skill option, and a faint smile comes to his lips while he imagines what might happen if he enhances his avatar skill. Back inside his room, he observes his avatar, and with a light mood he wonders if it looks quite manly. The avatar glances back at him and remarks that he appears quite strong himself and asks if he has been exercising. Han Sung replies that this is simply the outcome of steady and consistent effort. With the awakening of his avatar ability, his awareness separates into two parts, and he gains the freedom to move between them. By strengthening the avatar ability further, he unlocks another talent called Mind Hub, which filters out all the undesired emotions, including pain, from his avatar. Han Sung even tests it out by punching his avatar and slamming him into the door, and as expected, there is no trace of pain. A realization strikes him that he can now travel into another world while remaining in his own room. The thought fills him with joy as he compares it to playing a game while still in real life. Yet the surprises do not end there, since he now notices that there are 3 versions of him. He reflects that as his strength continues to rise, he will gain even more avatars, so naming them is necessary to avoid any confusion. Though he has never been skilled at naming, he sits with them to think carefully before settling on a decision. He finally speaks to the first avatar, saying that from this point his name will be Hans, and tells the second one that he shall be Heinz. Hans shows signs of affinity with magic, and Heinz carries durability, though to him both seem somewhat ordinary in talent. With a firm tone, he then announces that it is time to begin the true quest. Hans is dumped off to another world while Heinz is tasked with the worst chore of clearing away a year's worth of garbage. As he steps outside his apartment with the garbage under the sharp sunlight, he notices there is no trace of his usual anxiety. The Mind Hub ability is surely functioning well, and he then becomes aware that Hans has reached the other world safely. Through Hans' eyes, he finds himself within a forest where the sun has already set. He assumes that in such a calm place, nothing dangerous would appear. However, against his expectation, a big bad black panther emerges in front of him and leaps onto him, yet he is able to counter it quickly with his sword. Just as he thought, there is no pain or fear, since to him it feels like nothing more than a game. He channels magic into his blade and swings at the neck of the panther, ending its life in a single strike. But his body soon feels tired, and he realizes that he might run into another monster if he stays here. Just then, his eyes settle on a village in the distance. As he makes his way to the village, an old man shows up to greet him and introduces himself as Malcolm, the chief of the village. Malcolm comments with surprise that it is remarkable for Hans to have survived the dangerous forest at night. Hans admits that he has been through a lot and asks if he might be allowed to stay in the village for the night. The old chief responds with kindness, saying that people should always help one another. Hans thanks him sincerely for this offer. As they walk through the village, Malcolm observes his unusual clothes and equipment and questions whether he has come from far away. Hans replies that he has wandered across many places, and while he was at it, he collected whatever he found on the way. Malcolm then tells him that outsiders are rare, and he feels delighted to have him here, and even invites Hans to enjoy a drink at the local tavern. Later, in a small room, Hans rests upon a bed and is amazed by the generous hospitality of the villagers, since he is given both a meal and a place to sleep without a single penny. He cannot remember the last time he spent such cheerful hours, and the day ends pleasantly, and he soon sleeps completely unaware of another presence inside the room. Meanwhile, in the real world, Han Sung sits in his room chugging a drink and remarks how wonderful it is to journey through another world while bathing and eating a chicken dinner at the same time. A small worry nags at him as he thinks about Heinz, who is pushing himself through intense training to fully utilize his immense durability. Han Sung believes that it is always wise to be well prepared in case they ever get deployed at any time. When Heinz returns from training, Han Sung comments that since his other selves are working hard, he will now take charge of learning how the other world truly works so he may act as a proper commander. He opens his laptop to take on the role of the commander, but he feels something is wrong. Suddenly, a red system notification appears on the screen, telling him about his avatar's death. He is shocked as he stares at the screen. He realizes that if Hans died after he went to the village, then the Master Roshi without wrinkles must have poisoned his drink. He facepalms at his own stupidity, thinking he really should have been much more cautious when walking into such unknown territory. However, he is surprised when he learns that his connection with the clone is somehow restored again. Inside the other world, the village chief, who is actually a necromancer, feels sad since he thought the outsider could be useful because he managed to cross the monster forest completely all by himself. But in the end, he could only transform into a plain elite skeleton. At the same time, our hero feels confused when he notices his pale, bony hands, and a panel immediately informs him that his race has changed from living into undead, and now he has received a unique skill called Corrupted Heart. The moment he realizes he is an undead, our protagonist is left completely dumbfounded, but he also counts himself lucky because he unlocked a skill called Mind Hub after he turned, which makes his mental connection with Hans stronger. When he looks around, he nearly wets his own bones on seeing the huge crowd of undead people and realizes that everyone in the room was once alive before they turned. Just then, a guy he saw at the tavern the day before walks in and complains loudly that his miserable life sucks. Meanwhile, Han Sung wonders if everyone he saw earlier were actually necromancers. Irritated, the man starts staring directly at him, and our hero thinks he got caught. But as it turns out, the guy is only annoyed that someone forgot to move his body with the others, and he lazily orders Hans to join the undead squad. Right after, he suddenly feels an imaginary force trying to move his body, but he notices it is as pathetic as the necromancer's boring life, so he could easily break it if he really did not want to play along for now. After that, the man says that the chief is a pain and finally leaves the place. Our boy quickly realizes that the power used there feels very similar to the one he uses to control Hans, and he figures his quick understanding of those powers is thanks to his unnaturally high magic affinity. That thought makes him curious if he could eventually steal control over all the other undead, and surely enough, it only takes him 1 week to successfully take control over the others. When his eyes flame up as he orders his underling to move, the skeleton rises menacingly and starts dancing around, making him look like a guy who failed his audition to play Ains and Overlord. Turns out, our hero can only control a single undead at the moment, even though he is an elite skeleton. While lost in thought, he spots the rat that has been nibbling at his bones for the last 7 days and quickly picks it up. He plays with the squeaker and jokes that it is annoyingly small and annoyingly fast, and that is exactly when it hits him. He gets the thought that since it is both small and fast, he should give the little guy an early ending, and then use his power to make it undead. Surprisingly, his plan works, so he sends off the little guy to spy for him, while still being able to sense everything it can. Outside, he overhears the man who is always complaining unlocking the door to a warehouse, where he thinks more undead might be stored. Just as he thinks he should go in, the door creaks open and a miasma so menacing leaks out that our hero feels it even though the Mind Hub greatly suppresses his senses. He quickly gets the feeling that he will not make it out alive if he digs too deep. Later, the man named Zephy complains again to his friend that his hairline recedes every time he goes inside the warehouse, and his friend hopes his daily check will be over soon. Zephy is annoyed that he has to stand guard like a fool inside a village barricaded from every single side, thinking that nobody would dare to sneak in. What he does not know, though, is that our boy was sneaking around inside all along. He thinks there's a likely immortal king's fragment inside and moves on to search quietly for more details. Right as he wonders where the old man could be, a spike suddenly shoots into his body from the ground, which turns out to be the chief himself, who is amused that he somehow found a rat after all. Our hero desperately hopes his strange power did not get found out, as the chief is confused why a creature with no trace of dark magic is somehow filled with such dark energy. He theorizes that it might have been created purely from dark energy, and there is only one place where that could ever come from. He asks Zephy to check the warehouse like he was supposed to, while our protagonist swears to avenge Alfred the Mouse. The next morning, Zephy kicks the door wide open and throws a tantrum because he cannot believe the chief chewed him out over one lousy rat crawling out of a basement. He vents his frustration on the undead by beating up one, then bullying the corpse of the man whose tongue he once cut out because he said he would not let trash like him hurt his family. He feels great after unloading his anger on the bodies and wishes he could hunt helpless villagers screaming for their lives just like in the good old days. Because he has clearly not had enough, Zephy mocks his victims by saying he should be grateful he can spend an eternity with his dear wife, But the undead suddenly grabs his shoulder from behind and digs its fingers painfully into his skin. That terrifies the necromancer so much his knees go weak and he screams like a little girl. He repeatedly orders the undead to stay away, but the monster simply refuses to listen at all. Right as he is about to blast away with magic, the corpse of that guy's wife chokes him tightly from behind, and before he realizes it, he becomes a victim of the very people he once tortured. In the background, our hero calmly walks his merry way right out of the cellar, ready to finally avenge all the countless poor souls who fell victim to the disgusting village of scum. Meanwhile, outside, the hero sends another clone who pretends to be Han's brother, claiming his twin is inside. The guards tell them that Hans already left, but the clone begs them to at least let him meet the chief. Hearing the commotion, the chief approaches the outsider and loudly introduces himself, but the old man's eyes nearly pop out when he sees the outsider's face. The clone calmly tells him that he believes his twin brother Hans is trapped inside. On the other hand, Hans is inside the defective goods warehouse where the Immortal King's fragment is stored. He notices it is resonating with the undead standing in a circle around it. Not wanting to stay in that depressing place for long, he grabs the fragment and wastes no time putting it to use. But suddenly, a radiant flash of purple bursts out from his chest. Outside, while the clone talks with the old chief, he claims to have a power that lets him detect his brother's location. The old man does not buy it, and just then, a loud noise comes out of the warehouse. The chief and guards instantly realize something happened to the fragment. At that moment, the old man transforms into a wraith and flies toward the warehouse, ordering the guards to eliminate the outsider. The men quickly turn around and aim their spears toward the threat, only to realize he vanished faster than their father who went out to buy milk. Back in the warehouse, Hans hears voices in his head screaming at him to go on a murder spree. Even though his mind hub's skill should dull the effect, the pain is so strong he cannot believe anyone could absorb a fragment and stay sane. Once the shard is fully absorbed, a panel informs him that he has fulfilled the conditions for growth. He evolves into an immortal Demilich and gains a new skill called Evil Wisdom, which greatly boosts his power on a dark night. Outside the room, one of the necromancers complains that he got stuck with boring guard duty just because Zephy let out a single zombie rat. Just then, the old man's voice blasts into his head so loudly he nearly goes deaf, ordering him to check the fragment immediately. Assuming Zephy is inside, he yells at the guy to check the fragment. But when the guard looks in to see why his target went silent, a pair of undead arms suddenly reach out for him, and in that instant he realizes every undead inside is gathering to break down the door. Standing in the back, Sans from Undertale greets him, and the guard sweats in confusion at how a monster can speak so clearly. In a panic, he hurls a magic blast at the door, but the very next moment the horde of undead smash it apart. Hans steps out and says it is rude to ignore his greeting. In his mind, Han Sung wonders if it is because of his evil wisdom skill or not, but for the first time he feels like a demon lord with perfect command over dark magic. With his newly awakened dark magic, Hans nukes the warehouse and orders his undead army to slay all the so-called humans in the cursed village. His servants rush to start the zombie apocalypse, but he is thrown off when their broken bodies come flying back at him. Fuming with anger, the village chief demands to know how a puny elite skeleton managed to absorb the Immortal King's fragment. That does not scare Hans at all, though. He casually greets the geezer like they're old buddies and thanks him for stealing his heart because he found a far better substitute sitting in the warehouse. His bold attitude gives the old man a stroke, so the chief fires off Finger of Death. The bolt of dark magic blasts Hans' arm away, so he asks the chief if his parents never taught him not to interrupt someone while they are speaking. The angry elder launches more bolts, shouting that he spent a year developing the fragment to become stronger than ever, not to let an elite skeleton turn into a Demilich. He unleashes another heavy spell, but Hans calmly summons a shield to block it and fires back that only he could withstand it, since anyone else would have gone mad from the mental corrosion. Then, when the chief yells out another cringy spell name, Hans snaps and declares it is time to avenge Alfred. Hearing that, the chief demands to know if Hans really knew someone before invading the village. Hans responds with his own barrage of spells and completely overwhelms him, leaving the old man with no choice but to escape by casting Oath of Ruin. That spell suddenly drags out the soul of a man fighting nearby, and soon all the necromancers in the village lose their souls, which condense into a dark crown that boosts the chief's power. With that crown, the elder declares it is Hans' time to die and begins chanting another long spell name, but Hans cuts him off with a bullet mid-sentence, then thanks the geezer for teaching him so many dark magic spells. Once the old man goes down, Hans stares into the sky and quietly hopes Alfred can finally rest in peace. Meanwhile, in a distant church, St. Restia suddenly senses a disturbing presence during her prayers. She rushes out to tell the bishop to spread word that she saw signs of the Immortal King's revival in the west. After the bishop leaves in a hurry, she vows she will not let the Immortal King incident from 100 years ago ever repeat. Back at the village, Hans steps over the littered bodies on the ground and states that almost all of his troops were wiped out in the battle. He does not stress about it too much since he knows they can always be spawned again thanks to his necromancer skills. On the other hand, our boy realizes that he has to deal with his missing arm first. Scanning the battlefield like it is some kind of thrift shop, our hero spots a decent arm and yanks it off a skeleton. Using his super recovery skills, Hans fuses the broken bones back together and looks quite satisfied with the results. Our hero then decides it is time to raise more skeletons to refill his army as he begins to perform black magic on a nearby pile of bones. He keeps chanting the spell while the skeleton lifts into the air and absorbs the dark energy. However, the spell ends up failing and the skeleton crashes down to the ground in pieces, catching our hero completely off guard. Sometime later, after experimenting a couple more times, he now feels confident in his abilities and shifts his attention to the evil village chief. Hans raises his hand toward the old man's body and says he can probably squeeze out some juicy info from this dried raisin. Hans suddenly stops the spell when he realizes that the chief does not even have a soul. He then exposes a magic circle on the man's body that must have sucked the soul away and realizes there might be an organization behind all of this. Hans figures it makes sense, considering how carefully thought out the plan was, but still decides to use the body anyway. He chooses to make the old man one of his elite soldiers with ridiculous combat power and charges up the dark energy in his palm. Our boy activates his necromancy skill again and begins to replace the magic inside the chief's body with his own dark energy. Our hero quickly collects the remaining scraps of memory and builds an entirely new consciousness for the guy. With that, the chief is reborn as a deaf wizard who immediately asks our boy to give him orders. Our hero marvels at his fresh creation and names the reborn chief Malcolm. When no reply comes, Hans smacks him across the head and orders him to answer properly. He figures that even though the guy no longer remembers his past life, he still deserves to be punished for the crimes he did. Our hero calls him again, and this time the deaf wizard answers instantly. Hans gets a creepy look in his eyes and remarks that the old man's staff looks pretty slick. After securing some new drip, our hero turns toward the massive pile of bones and recognizes the zombie who once helped unalive Zelfe. Hans places a hand on the zombie's head and tells him to finally rest with his family as he lights up the entire pile of corpses in flames. Meanwhile, back in the main body, Han is living his best life while ordering takeout. He casually pulls out his phone and checks the latest prices on gold, since his clone managed to grab all the loot from the evil cult in the village. He then summons Hans to take a good look at the goods, but the clone's overwhelming aura nearly scares him half to death, so he immediately dismisses the summon. After catching his breath, he whispers that he really thought he was about to die just now and wonders what exactly he should do next. Suddenly, it clicks to him that the karma shop exists, and he rushes to check his points, which turn out to be nearly 800,000. Our boy chooses to upgrade his unique skill, which ends up boosting his mental strength far beyond normal limits. Along with that, he gains a brand new skill called Clear Mirror that basically works as a shield against mental attacks. Sometime later, he is busy stacking up the gold bars while thinking that he actually feels more at ease around Hans now since the new skill is applied to the main body. He laughs at how he always seems to get exactly the skill he needs the most and declares that it is officially time to make more money than Elon Musk. The moment he drops the loot bags in front of the shop workers, they are left completely speechless by the ridiculous amount. He tells them to deposit everything straight into his account and then takes his leave while the workers personally escort him to the doorstep. Playing it safe, Han hides his clone in the shadows in case things turn ugly, and even throws a mask on the guy to keep his identity secret. Just as he says that maybe he is being a little too paranoid, an explosion rocks the building right behind him. Out from the hole appear a Twilight-wanted werewolf and a masked human thief standing side by side. The furrier remarks that he never expected a small-time place like this to hold so much gold, while the masked human reminds him that they need to bail out of here first. The two take off from the jewelry store with their hands full of loot and head straight in our hero's direction, while some random background NPC screams for help. These two are what people call villains, ones who abuse their newly gained abilities just to commit crimes, but usually the Guardians show up to protect the civilians from them. The werewolf suddenly swings a punch that sends our hero flying while yelling at him to move out of the way. Our boy clutches his face in pain and thinks the Guardians will handle it, but then he starts shivering as reality hits that he himself cannot do anything. The thief duo keep bolting away at full speed and begin bragging that not even the Guardians will manage to catch them. The wolf states that they just need to reach their exit portal, but instead they nearly choke on the shock of their lives when they discover their getaway driver got Mike Tyson. As the werewolf hurries to help his buddy back up, the masked thief points toward a skeleton standing in the distance and nervously asks if that guy is a guardian. Our boy figures that while Han Sung is helpless right now, Hans is just built different, and he immediately summons skeletons that leave the villains completely spooked. Sometime later, a squad of people heads toward the crime scene. The leader in front tells the rest to hurry the hell up, but as soon as the Guardians arrive, they freeze in confusion and wonder what the hell just went down here. One of them channels his inner Sherlock and guesses that someone had a fight with the villains and dipped before they could show up. The leader figures the person might still be nearby and orders his team to sweep the area. But our clone slips away easily by melting back into the shadows and returns to our hero. Han stretches his arms, calls it a decent workout, and starts heading back home. The scene then shifts to Hines, who looks hyped out of his mind and shouts that he has finally arrived. He recalls Malcolm's words and finds it amusing that the chief did not lie after all. Our hero then marches in the city like he owns the place and proudly declares that this is his grand entrance to a brand new career in another world. Unfortunately, his mood takes a nosedive the second he realizes the whole area is as empty as his ex's heart. There are no guards, no checkpoints, and apparently nobody cares that outsiders are just walking in. Right then, a loud NPC catches his attention, and he turns to see two thugs shaking down a young girl who is desperately begging for more time. The bald thug tells her flat out that she has 3 days to cough up 2 silver coins or they will not be able to help her anymore. Hines is clearly annoyed by their behavior, but decides it is not his problem and stays out of it. The girl bolts off and her panic ends up crashing straight into our hero. She immediately apologizes again and again. Instead of brushing her off, our hero asks if she knows the city well, while thinking to himself that he could use a proper guide. The girl looks confused and asks who he even is, but he simply pulls out 2 silver coins and says he is her new employer and that they need to discuss business, which makes her starry-eyed. After giving him the full tour till the sun goes down, the girl finally leads him to a rundown inn and insists that this should be good enough for someone like him. Hines eventually learns that the girl's name is Diana, who after losing her parents, had no choice but to scrape together whatever little money she could to support her sick younger brother. However, she was unable to pay the protection money demanded by the local thugs, but changed when she crossed paths with our hero, who now tells her to come by the inn in the morning for more work. Lying back on the stiff bed, he figures that if she decides to run off, then he will consider it a good deed, and with that, he switches to sleep mode. Morning arrives, and our hero wakes only to immediately start grumbling about how the bed was harder than stone. Hines then drags himself to the window and gets confused when he spots the same girl standing outside this early in the morning. He calls out in disbelief and Diana greets him with a bright smile while he demands to know what exactly she is doing there at dawn. A little later, the two settle down in the dining area for breakfast. Our hero tells Diana flat out not to show up this early again, and she happily agrees to whatever he says without the slightest hesitation. He starts to get slightly irritated at being called sir, but before he can say much, the girl interrupts to ask if he is done with his food. When he replies that she can have the rest, Diana thanks him and stashes the half-eaten bread into her bag like it is a quest item. The city our hero currently finds himself in is called Azantu, a small town within the kingdom of Thalia. Hines admits that it looks like a textbook medieval city, though something about it feels unsettling as there are strange symbols drawn across the city. He inspects it closely, wondering if it is just paint, only for Diana to state that the markings are actually made with blood. Naturally, Hines tries to lean in and sniff it for confirmation, but Diana cuts him off by asking if he had deer stew last night, which catches him completely off guard. She grins and proudly says her sense of smell is unusually sharp, which makes our hero pause and think that someone could easily mistake it for an actual ability. He then changes the subject and asks what the symbol means, and Diana explains that it belongs to an organization called Barkalak. She starts going deeper into the lore of this ominous group, then she suddenly freezes. Hines asks her what the matter is, but she blurts out something about a smell. Our boy tries to follow her train of thought, only for Diana to immediately declare that the source is freshly baked bread, which she insists is an absolute must-have in this city. Hines asks if she is not full from earlier, but Diana boldly claims she can still eat much more without breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, in a shady alleyway, someone is being dragged into a building, leaving a trail of blood behind. A few days have passed since our hero began exploring the city, but this time Diana does not show up at their usual meeting spot. Just then, the same thugs from before call out to him, saying they have something to discuss, though our boy seems oddly cheerful about it. He offers them a few silver coins and says he hopes it helps keep the peace in the city, and the thugs then mock him for being so considerate. Hines notices the same symbol printed on their backs and remembers Diana's warning to stay away from the back alleys. That is when he overhears the two talking about someone they recently grabbed, and the red flags instantly go up that they might have taken Diana. Calling out to them, he thinks that if things go south, he will just cancel the summon. He then tells the thugs he has a few questions, but right at that moment, Diana suddenly appears and catches him by surprise. The thugs start acting up and ask what he is so curious about, to which Hines nervously asks if the money he gave them was really enough. A moment later, he holds up his empty pouch and begins yelling at Diana for making him waste so much money because of her. However, the girl is on the verge of tears and says that her younger brother is missing. She explains that he was getting better thanks to all the food, but now she cannot find him anywhere. That is when Haynes recalls what the thugs were saying earlier and asks her if Barkalak took the boy. Diana is on the verge of breaking down, but our hero assures her that he will pay whatever price the thugs demand. Even so, Diana sobs and tells him that if the thugs really took Aaron, he is going to die because the organization is after blood. Hines is left confused, but she then reveals the truth that this city is actually a blood farm for vampires. The scene then shifts to the village, where an unknown figure stands among the corpses and says he can feel dark magic all around. He wonders to himself whether this entire scene was caused by an internal revolt or something else, feeling annoyed since he had planned to take the shard for himself once it matured. The figure then reveals his sharp vampire fangs and confidently declares that he will find the thief soon enough. Coming back to Hines, Diana explains that every single organization here, including Barkalak, is run by vampires. Through her tears, she says it makes no difference whether someone escapes the city or not because everyone eventually dies. The two orphans try their hardest to live their daily lives, but in the end she finds it hopeless since the vampires will eat them no matter what. Hines claps Diana's cheeks with both hands and tells her to focus because if what she says is true, then they do not have any time to waste. She then asks if he is seriously offering to help and insists that it is impossible, but our hero tells her not to worry since he is basically a pro at folding thugs like a lawn chair. Meanwhile, in a nearby tavern, the thugs are living it up as they gamble away all the silver they milked off our hero. Just then, Haynes strolls into the building, catching them completely off guard, but the one in the blue shirt recognizes him instantly. The thug pats Hines like a car salesman and proudly introduces him as their overly generous sponsor. The guy keeps taunting him without realizing what already happened to the guards outside. That is when our boy finally speaks, telling them to cough up the location of the child, and the blue shirt thug's face instantly goes pale. He tries to put up an act to intimidate our hero, but instead ends up with a surprise knife to the throat. Holding him by the blade, our hero roasts the life out of the thug before sending the trash straight to hell. The other two immediately spring into action, while Hines thinks that since he has both toughness and instant recovery, he should be able to hold out. Without wasting time, he charges forward with a heavy swing as the bandana thug tries to land a cheap shot to the gut. However, the thug gets the shock of his life when he realizes his blade didn't even pierce the skin. And then he gets knocked clean out with a brutal smack straight to the skull. Our hero proudly announces that he is actually wearing body armor underneath, something he brought from the real world, but the bald thug doesn't care and charges in anyway. With a magic shield, Hines blocks the attack with ease, which makes the guy lose his mind wondering where the magic items came from, only to be silenced by a knife driven straight through his chest. Our hero pats himself on the back for stocking up on items and feels a little awkward for grabbing so many since the fight ended so quickly. To his surprise, a swarm of thugs suddenly pours in from the stairs and he curses himself for opening his big mouth. But with the power of plot armor on his side, Hines tears through the lot of them one after another, and in the end he stands over their bodies while catching his breath like he is auditioning for solo leveling. Pulling a knife out of his shoulder like it's just another weekend, he talks to himself that he's already lost count of how many he dropped. His wounds instantly close up and he steps on one of the thugs, demanding the kid's location, but the guy refuses to break. The thug only warns Hines that he will regret messing with their organization because once the master returns, our hero is finished. Hines thanks him for the info but warns him to worry about his own life first, then stomps his head flat like a pancake. Sometime later, Hines opens a door deeper in the building and finds a young boy inside. The kid instantly starts trembling and begs not to be hurt, but Hines reassures him that he came to save him on behalf of his sister. The boy asks if our hero really knows his sister, but Hines tells him there's no time for talk and they need to get out fast. Meanwhile, a bat flutters through the sky in broad daylight and lands on an open window. It begins to shift form as it snaps at the hero for daring to steal its meal. The vampire mocks Hines and asks if he intends to mess with his food, then questions whether he belongs to the Covenant of Destiny. The bloodsucker presses further, asking if Hines is related to the child, and warns him of what happens when vampires get hungry. Hines calmly replies that he is nothing more than an outsider who got hustled by the vampire's thugs and just happened to run into the boy along the way. The vampire clearly isn't amused and begins channeling blood magic into his hands and proudly declares that he prefers to feast on cute boys. He then hurls his magic forward and yells at Hines to die already. The very last second, our hero scoops up the boy and dodges as the blast tears apart everything behind them. Our hero groans as he rises from the floor, realizing from the smell that he is surrounded by smashed beer bottles, then quickly shakes Aaron to wake him. Pulling the boy to his feet, he tells him that now is the time to escape, but right then the vampire lands in front of them. The creature admits Hines is faster than expected and decides this will make for a perfect warm-up before the meal. He charges another attack, but Hines shoves Aaron aside and readies himself for the fight. Our hero manages to block the first blow, but the vampire instantly extends his claws and slashes straight at him. The vampire comments that this little human is sturdier than expected with insane recovery skills, while our boy thinks that he's completely toast. The edgy monster licks his lips and says that maybe this will be the real feast, while Hines can't help but realize he'd already be a corpse if the vampire wasn't busy playing around. Even so, our hero refuses to just lie down and raises a fist in defiance, only for the vampire to casually slice his arm clean off, mocking that he needs to prepare his meal first. Gritting his teeth through the pain, Hines hears the monster tell him that all his struggles are pointless and he will pay with his life. But Hines isn't the type to fold and thinks that if the gap in strength is this wide, then the only option left is to take everyone down together. With that thought, he bites down on a hidden red orb stashed in his mouth, and in an instant flames erupt and wrap around his body. The vampire suddenly looks paler than Michael Jackson as he realizes that the orb was a magic fire tool. He demands to know when Hines managed to slip that in, and our hero recalls how he snatched the chance the moment he spotted the spilled beer and pieced together the crazy plan. Hines slams the vampire down, and the monster shouts out he seriously intends to take them both out in one shot. In desperation, the creature swipes at him and slashes our hero's legs, and then starts laughing that the battle is won. But our boy runs on a Sigma grind set to never quit and literally uses his head to bash sense straight into the vampire. With a savage grin, Hines throws the monster's own words back at him about his body being tough as he lunges in with what's left of his upper half. The vampire panics and screams at him to stop, but it's too late as the flames reach the beer barrels and a huge explosion occurs through the building. Staring at the burning building, our hero admires the chaos for a moment and then remarks that being too tough can really be a problem, considering he is alive in such a state. He then reflects that the mission to help the orphan girl has been successfully completed, while Diana shouts for him to return. The system then informs the main body that Avatar Hines has died and will require a week to respawn. The scene shifts to Diana, who is now happily earning money by cleaning shoes. A well-dressed NPC thanks her and mentions that he left the payment on the table. Just then, another customer appears behind her, requesting their shoes to be done as well. Diana turns around and greets them with full hospitality, but her eyes suddenly light up as she realizes her savior has arrived and she rushes forward to hug him. Hines pats her head and reassures her that he would never go down that easily, while inwardly acknowledging the lie since he did actually die back there. Knowing that an avatar takes a whole week to respawn and that Diana would worry, he decides it is best to create another avatar, naming the new clone Hines 2. While hugging the girl, he wonders if she will notice the difference, but Diana seems perfectly convinced it is the same person, since his soul smells exactly like before. Coming back to reality, she warns him to run since the vampires are searching everywhere, but our hero calmly reassures her that he already has a plan. He thinks that with the immortal King Hans backing him, he has nothing to fear, but he is completely unaware of the bat spying on him from a distance. Our hero then checks the system screen and notes that he must wait 10 days for the respawn cooldown to finish. Just then, the same bat swoops in, smashing through the window as it transforms into a vampire and clamps onto our hero's throat. The vampire grips Hines' neck tightly, demanding to know if he is responsible for everything, since the traces from the forest led directly to this location. The creature seems thrilled to discover an outsider here, at the scene where one of their own was recently unalived, while our hero panics because he cannot move a single muscle in his body. Our boy resists the urge to say daddy and instead plays it innocent, acting like he has no clue what's happening. The vampire clearly isn't buying it and leans in to nibble on Hines' neck, making him scream out in pain. The bloodsucker wipes the red off his lips, repeats the same question, and warns him that this time lying won't work. Hines wonders what the hell is going on as he feels his body shifting, only for the system to announce that he is now in the process of turning into a vampire. The The monster coldly demands to know if he is connected to the covenant of destiny reversal or not. With vampire blood inside him forcing his body to submit, he replies that he is nothing more than a simple traveler. On the inside, though, he realizes the commands can be ignored since the main hub controlling the clone is acting like a firewall, stripping away all the breeding potential from his blood. The vampire looks disappointed that he didn't find what he was searching for, and simply orders Heinz to serve him from now on. That actually works out in Heinz's favor, since tagging along means free info on the enemy. Before long, the two arrive at Barkalak headquarters, where the subordinates immediately bow and greet the vampire as Lord Wyrak. The underlings waste no time gossiping about Heinz, calling it pathetic and distasteful to hire such a low-class creature. Just then, a cheerful vampire girl shows up and instantly latches onto Heinz. She introduces herself as Rosilica, while Heinz wonders who this drunk broad even is. He introduces himself politely, but she brushes it off, telling him to loosen up since they are both halflings. She hands him a glass of freshly squeezed blood, leaving him thinking that he has no choice but to drink if he wants to avoid looking suspicious. The moment he takes a sip, an almost uncontrollable bloodlust hits him, so he forces himself to gulp down the entire thing in one go while blocking off his taste and smell to survive it. He thanks Rosilica for the drink, only for her to give him a funny look before cheerfully saying he would definitely be on her sucking dry list if he was a human. Heinz quickly changes the subject and asks her what bloodling even is. She finds it strange that he does not know anything about how vampire society works and explains that bloodlings are basically knights who serve pure bloods, the ones considered nobles. Above them sit the true bloods, and even higher are the sacred bloods who are practically legends. Our hero asks more about the true bloods, and she explains that they are their progenitors, the ancestors they are bound to obey no matter what. A sudden ding cuts their talk short as Lord Wyrak calls the room to order, standing alongside the pure bloods Parida and Typol. He addresses everyone and states that a fragment of the Undying King, which was being raised by the Oath of Heaven reversal cult, has vanished. Before disappearing completely, the trace showed it was headed here, and there is a real chance it is already within this place. Heinz asks what that even means, to which Rosilica explains that a bunch of lunatics in a forest village were trying to cultivate the fragment, which immediately makes Heinz recall the village incident. Once the meeting ends, the two bloodlings head out into the city under the sun, while Rosilica grumbles that they are basically getting roasted alive. Heinz admits his own strength is fading bit by bit, but Rosilica stays firm, insisting they cannot let Lady Parida search alone. Just then, she slips up and mentions that the vampires moved their fragment here, which Heinz instantly catches onto and asks if the vampires actually have a fragment of their own. Rosilica explains that after stealing the fragment from the dark mages, the higher-ups were planning to merge it with their own. That thought instantly lights Heinz up, since it means there is a chance only a pure blood is guarding the fragment right now. Fired up, he asks Rosilica if she knows the exact location, but she laughs and says the higher-ups would never reveal something like that to someone as low-ranked as her. The scene then shifts over to Diana, who casually munches on food while revealing that she might actually know where the fragment is. This completely catches Heinz off guard, and Diana stays confident about knowing about its whereabouts, which nearly makes our hero lose his mind. He asks Diana with excitement if she is really certain, and she begins explaining that back in the day she used to make money cleaning tombs. Every Friday, members of Barkalak would gather there and enter a stone chamber, and whenever they opened it, she could smell something unbearably evil leaking out. As the siblings discuss the tombs, Heinz starts thinking that the place might be worth checking out himself. He thanks Diana for the lead and decides he will investigate alone, but the girl tugs at his sleeve and whispers that he smells different than usual. Heinz realizes there is no point lying to her and admits that he was turned into a vampire. Diana is left completely dumbfounded, but he reassures her that no matter what, he will never let harm come to her. After taking a few moments to process things, she nervously offers that Heinz can drink a little of her blood if he is struggling. Our hero gets momentarily stunned by that response and then smacks her on the head for saying something so reckless. He tells her to just tell him where exactly that foul smell was coming from. Meanwhile, at the cemetery, screams echo through the night as a vampire orders a human to stand properly. He mocks the terrified man and asks if the poor guy just wants to die. Typol then sneers that if the human can land even a single strike, he will let him go free. The human looks moments away from collapsing but forces out a scream and charges forward. Typol activates his blood magic and summons crimson threads that wrap around the man like a net. The threads dig in, drain him dry, and within seconds, the man shrivels up into nothing more than a lifeless husk. Typol is still unsatisfied, and he snaps in his underling to clean up the corpse, and warns it to bring him someone tougher next time. As the gremlin bends down to drive the body, he suddenly senses a disturbance and calls out to whoever is hiding. Out of nowhere, skeletons burst forth, which catches the vampire completely off guard, and he instantly shouts for his servants to defend him. Along with the skeletons, a shadow snakes his way across the ground and suddenly launches spikes straight at the vampire. Taipo blocks the strike with his arm and immediately demands to know if his opponent is connected to the Covenant. He keeps barking questions, but Hans stays silent and death stares the bloodsucker down. Taipo quickly loses patience and declares that he will carve the answers out once he severs Hans's head. With that, the vampire swings wide and cleaves through a few skeletons, while Hans calmly thinks back on the words the vampire just spat. He then reshapes the shattered bones into razor-sharp spears and sends them flying towards Taipo, who has no room to dodge. Heinz informs him that Lord Weyrak is already dealing with the monsters outside. Satisfied, Taipo orders Heinz to assist him, since this cursed skeleton is far stronger than expected. But the smug pure blood is instantly blindsided when Heinz suddenly sinks his fangs into his neck and drains his blood. Taipo tries to break free and shouts at him, demanding to know if he has completely lost his mind. Before he can break free, his body gets restrained by black magic, and in that moment, he finally realizes the truth that the Bloodling is working with the Demi-Lich. Taipo screams in desperation that feeding on their own kind is a grave sin that can shatter a vampire's mind, but Heinz could not care less as he drains the pure blood completely dry, leaving nothing but a wrinkly raisin. Wiping the blood from his face, Heinz boldly declares that corruption will never take hold of him. The system instantly notifies him that he has unlocked blood magic, which makes him smile since now he can finally break through the blood barrier, though Hans quickly warns Heinz that they do not have the luxury of time. Hans chooses the next best option and smashes straight through the wall. Both clones step up to the hole and gaze down at the second fragment of the Undying King. The Demi-Lich extends his hand to claim it, but the violent surge of aura nearly blasts him backwards. Even with the hub acting as a filter, the crushing wave of negative energy is far too much to handle on its own. Our boy quickly decides to channel every ounce of mental power from his clones directly into Hans like Power Rangers from Temu. Meanwhile, outside, Weyrak rushes toward the scene but freezes mid-step the moment he senses that overwhelming aura. Hans rises into the air, which brings Weyrak to attention, and he snaps orders for his soldiers to open fire. The blood bullets splatter uselessly across the Demi-Lich, doing nothing but making him visibly annoyed. In response, Hans swings and unleashes a devastating slash that obliterates several of the grunts, while Weyrak can only stand frozen in disbelief. After successfully consuming the second fragment, our hero unlocks terrifying new abilities and has now officially evolved into an Archlich. The scene shifts to two knights who stop outside the city gates and stare at the purple fire. The knight on foot states that it is clearly rising from Azamtu city, but suddenly, the rider on horseback begins coughing. The rider catches a falling ember in his palm and grimly states that they need to return to the cathedral right away. These falling embers are not ordinary ash, they are a clear sign that the immortal king is close to returning. Back at the cemetery, Weyrak stares in shock as he realizes the undead's power has skyrocketed nearly tenfold. Hans descends in front of the vampires, his hand glowing as he summons a new and upgraded staff. Pointing the staff forward, he unleashes a rolling wave of dark smoke that surrounds the vampires, leaving Weyrak tense as he tries to figure out exactly what the undead is about to pull. One of his underlings nervously suggests retreating, but he doesn't get to finish the thought and gets dragged into the shadows. Weyrak freezes in fear as the dark tendrils creep closer, and before he can react, he gets impaled by spikes throughout his body. The pure blood crashes to the ground in pain while Hans approaches Weyrak and remarks that the pure blood stands leagues above the others. He goes on to mock Weyrak and says that right now he is nothing more than a helpless farm animal. Furious, the pure blood demands to know how a skeleton could possibly absorb spiritual energy like that. Hans does not even bother to answer, and instead, a voice speaks up from behind the vampire. Heinz creeps up behind Weyrak and reveals that the skeleton was never alone. With unsettling calmness, Hans leans in and takes a chomp out of the pure blood's neck. Weyrak collapses instantly from fatigue, and the system notifies our hero that he has finally met the requirements to evolve into a pure blood. Heinz wipes the blood from his lips with a grin, thinking his theory was right that he can grow stronger far quicker by devouring other vampires. Meanwhile, in the distance, Razilica finally reaches Lady Peretta and hurriedly asks what they should do now. The girl breaks down crying, saying none of this would have happened if Lady Peretta had been there. But the pure blood calmly notes that the enemy must be absurdly strong since even Weyrak was taken down. She studies a piece of ash still potent with dark magic and concludes that whoever they face probably has broken abilities. Noticing that the sun has risen, she suggests they should return to base and gather reinforcements before making any more reckless moves. The scene then cuts to a man sprinting full speed through the city, swearing at the top of his lungs. Out of breath, he ducks into an alley and keeps ranting about how useless the vampires were for getting wiped out instantly. But before he can finish cursing, a shadow slips out of the wall and snatches him by the arm. Screams echo through the neighborhood as Hans takes out the remaining Barkalak trash across the city streets. Meanwhile, Hans hires a small merchant caravan and leaves the city with the two orphans. He cooks them some Gordon Ramsay tier steaks, making the siblings drool in pure excitement. The kids thank him with big smiles while our boy just waves them off and tells them to eat as much as they like without holding back. Watching the two, he reflects that their behavior has improved since leaving the city. He then asks Diana if their uncle owns a shop in Eastern Rapalesi. She admits that he does, but she is not sure if he would welcome them with open arms. Heinz tells her not to worry and thinks that if the worst comes to worst, he can just pay uncle to take care of them properly. Our hero feels heavy inside because of how attached he has grown and how much he has changed since arriving in this world. Diana notices his silence and asks if he is running low on blood or something. But Heinz quickly reassures her with a half-smile that he has already eaten more than enough. R sucked all the vampires dry in the region while Hans put the empty shells to use by turning them into undead soldiers. The Archlich orders the new zombies to march into the portal and notes how convenient this pocket dimension skill really is. The forbidden knowledge skills pairs well with the evil wisdom skill he already had, and he thinks that with enough research he could probably pull off opening subspace back on Earth too. Just then, a stranger activates blood magic and blasts a bullet clean through our hero's chest. The young vampire asks coldly if our hero is making a joke out of their kind by still walking around the city. The vampire Ovar then demands to know if he is really a part of the Heaven Reversal cult. Hans decides to roll with it and claims that he is one of them, but Ovar instantly calls Caps and someone already torched the cult's hideout, and the Archlich escape with the fragment. Ovar pulls out his scythe, declaring that our boy's time is over and charges at him with full speed. He slices Hans in half on the spot, only to watch in disbelief as the Archlich casually puts himself back together with dark magic like he is snapping Legos back in place. Ovar freezes for a second, but then snaps back while thinking that this opponent is on a whole other level. As Hans tries to retreat, he slams into a barrier, and the vampire kid smugly reveals that his best blood mages are stationed to make sure no one slips out. Our hero figures that brute force could crack the barrier if he really wanted to, but instead he decides this is the perfect chance to test out some of his new tricks. The vampire smirks and declares that he is about to fold our hero like an omelette. Our hero just laughs at the threat and reminds him once again that he is a member of the cult. Hans yells out that he is the very bane of their existence, but then adds that he will be leaving for now. His body starts to phase out as he thinks to himself that every proper villain needs a stylish exit. With that, our hero cancels the summoning and slips back into the main body, leaving the vampires confused as they struggle to figure out what just happened. Ovar suddenly snaps out of his daze and demands to know how the skeleton managed to break through their barrier, but before he gets an answer, one of the clan members drops dead on the ground. Staring at the arrow embedded in the grunt's back, the young vampire instantly recognizes the weapon as belonging to the paladins. Another clan member then calls out that they have a serious problem coming their way. The paladin corps charges directly at the vampires, which sends Ovar into a fury as he wonders if the Lich was stalling all along just to trigger this moment. The vampire kid digs his nails deep into his palm until blood flows and swears to himself that he will hunt that skeleton down and erase him from existence. On the other hand, Hans quietly celebrates the safe return of his clone back to the real world. Our hero remembers what he told Ovar and almost collapses from the cringe while Hans just watches the whole scene unfold. Our boy slaps his cheeks while asking himself what the hell possessed him, but admits that deep down he feels proud of it. The Archlich then points out that he went head-to-head with an evil vampire group, managed to save 2 orphans, and even protected the city. Hans says this sounds exactly like what a hero would do and then switches the topic to the karma points he earned from all of this. Pulling up the shop, our boy instantly starts sweating bullets when he sees that he somehow racked up nearly 700,000 points. He wonders if it came from turning the vampires against the dark mages, but then brushes the thought aside and uses the points to upgrade his unique ability. The whole room glows and the system informs him that his summoning limit increased and that he also gained a new skill called Persona, which gets hand fired up. That excitement shifts into confusion when he checks the skill's details, learning that he can now use any of his avatars to hold his emotions. He figures unique skills always develop around the user's needs, so the system must have decided this was the best path for him. Even though he made new bonds and fought powerful enemies, the real him has still been stuck in this room for 2 years straight. Nothing feels completely real to him anymore, almost like he's still playing some game. The harsh truth is that he remains a prisoner in this place, but now the reality he's been avoiding all this time is coming right at him. Han then activates the skill, channeling all the negative emotions from his life and transferring them to his clone, and instructs the Archlich to pour it into his vessel. Our boy immediately feels refreshed, like all the bad emotions got neatly stored away in a closet. He wonders if Hans can actually handle it, but the Archlich reassures him that he's used to this kind of load. Our hero freezes as he realizes that even though he understands what his clone just said, the tone has shifted on its own. Hans has developed his own personality, which leaves our boy confused, but before he can process it, a loud explosion interrupts their conversation. Looking out the window, our hero notes that a villain attack is underway in the heart of the city. He initially brushes it off and thinks that he doesn't need to intervene since it didn't happen in front of him like last time. The Archlich then questions if Han really needs an excuse to fight evil as he stands face to face with him. Staring into those cold eyes, our hero recognizes that all this time he had a nasty habit of avoiding anything that disturbed him. Our boy actually wants to take down these villains but was too scared to try. The Archlich states that chaos and lawlessness are spreading across the world, and now he must become Batman and deliver vengeance. Meanwhile, officers investigate the site of the explosion and discuss how villains are forming terror groups and launching organized attacks while the police lack backup. Hans assesses the situation and concludes that the battle is already lost for them. Seeing no point in leaving empty-handed, he summons several floating eyeballs and disperses them across the city. He commands the eyeballs to act as his scouts and track down every evildoer in the city, no matter where they hide. The scene shifts to a few gangsters using an unfortunate victim as an ashtray, completely unaware that Hans is watching them secretly. Elsewhere, a woman clutches her child tightly as she pleads with her tormentor that she has nowhere to run, but the attacker ignores her and prepares to hit the woman. In another part of the city, a masked thief breaks into a shop and searches through the cash register. Coming back to our hero, he notes that he can see everything and mentally prepares to punish the steaming piles of trash. Hans moves from one villain to the next as he catches them red-handed and thinks to himself that he will carve fear straight into their hearts. He warns the evildoers to remember this moment and makes it clear that no matter where they appear again, the same punishment awaits. The city is filled with a soothing song of screams as justice is delivered to those who committed crimes. Hans feels a rush of satisfaction that he is getting used to his new powers, but then thinks that this isn't enough. Summoning an entire horde of evil eyes, he declares that the cleansing must continue and sends his army of watchers across the city, ready to hunt down every last one of these trash villains.
Guys, that's the end of the video. If you liked this video, please leave a comment in the comment section. Also subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. Like the video and share it too. Thank you for watching and see you next time again.